Hi there, folks. Bob is here. I'm Mike Gold, Modern Mike, it says there. Mr. Harrison will be joining us live as soon as he is done helping tonight's guest fix his Wayback Machine. Um, Not to say that John Ostrander is a lot like um, Mr. Peabody or even Sherman. He's just a little technologically awkward. Aren't we all? But times change. John's got to work this one out. Luckily, Bob is doing. Bob knows his stuff. So I'm just going to sit here and babble for a while, do what I would be doing anyway if I weren't on the SquadCast. One of the things going on, and we'll probably touch on this with Bob, is that you may have noticed there is a huge tariff situation going on in the United States right now. So is Mike getting political again? No, he never stops. But, and this is the important part, this is how it affects the pop culture world and the comic book world in particular. Almost all of our comic books, the ones that are published as pamphlets, are printed in Canada. The vast majority of them are printed in Canada, which means that pretty soon the prices are going to go up by that tariff amount, despite what our president has been lying about to the American public, 49.9% of whom just lap it up. Canada doesn't pay a penny. It's all on the people who buy the product. People who buy the product are the distributors. The distributors buy the product for the retailers. Therefore, it's going to cost the comic book retailers 25% more to sell you American comics printed in Canada, which are most of them, as I keep on saying. Now, that may sound like a pain in the ass to you. You may be thinking comic books are expensive enough. I agree with you. But nonetheless, that's the situation we're in. The president says, nope, 25% tariff, screw Canada, and screw America. How does this affect the rest of the pop culture world? Well, lots of stuff comes from Canada, including bits and pieces, if not all, of a great many of our television shows, an increasing number of our movies, certainly our music content and every other aspect of popular culture. And I don't know what our president has against Canada. I mean, they've always been very nice to us. Remember the Iranian hostages? Well, they'd probably still be in Iran if not for Canada. So I'm a little annoyed about this. Whoa, there's Dean. How does Dean show up? Hi, Dean.
I don't know. It's the magic of I had my Dick Tracy watch, and that's how I was able to get on.
All right. Well, we should. Wow. Well, can you imitate John Ostrander? Is that?
No, you know what? I was really looking forward to this, and I also realized not that I want to watch the president talk at 9, but I was like, oh, I'm going to watch an hour of you guys, and then hop over and get really angry. Hey, Sherry, how you doing? Wait, Sherry's birthday recently. Anyway,
Yes.
I was Bob just sent me the invite, so while they're working their magic out, I thought I would just hop in as a ringer. Say
Well,
hello.
that's a pleasant surprise. This will be
So
fun.
you were just talking about the tariffs, which
Yes.
again, can I veer for a second?
Sure.
Because for some reason, the idea of tariffs reminds me of something that was talked about at the Oscars. Did you watch the Oscars?
Most of it, I think.
So Sean Baker, who won 4 awards, or the movie Honora won 4 awards. I haven't seen it yet. I do like Sean Baker's work, but one of the messages that was, or two of the messages that were coming through loud and clear on the Oscars was independent film, support independent film. It was a $6 million picture that won a lot of awards, which is great, awesome. Okay, I think we've all been touting the indie alternative, side of things for a long time anyway. But then they were talking about like we need to keep theaters alive, movie theaters, right?
That would be
And
great.
yes, movie theaters become expensive. Going to the movies, two people going to the movies could cost you like $100. If you're buying food, popcorn, travel, the movie ticket itself, and everything. I've been kind of boycotting going to the movies, seeing movies in movie theaters for a different reason. It's the people that go to the movie theaters. They don't seem to be able to watch a movie without being on their phone or talking or whatever. I don't know if last time you went to a movie theater, but oh my God, I don't mean to be too grumpy about it, but as
Oh,
much as I
grump away.
but as much as I cheer and champion, like we need to keep our movie theaters alive, can we? There should be a law, man. When you walk in and sit down and the movie comes on, you should be. It's only 2 hours usually of your time, right?
Yep,
We're getting there. Thanks, Steve, for grumping in the meantime. Who wrote that?
that would be Bob.
That was Bob.
He's
So,
ambidextrous.
but I mean, again, and listen, this is not the biggest problem in the world. I understand it. And listen, a lot of us have. I have a nice big TV set and a good sound system. That's how I watch most of my movies.
Yeah, me too. Me
So,
too.
but
And I
but there
think
is a
that's true for
magic.
most of them.
There's something undeniable. When the movie theater experience is working right, and the audience is in it together. Like I think the last time I gasped out loud with an audience was probably Avengers Infinity. Which one was the one where they started half of them started to disappear, right? At the end of the movie.
It was the next to the
Infinity
last.
War, maybe, or
Yeah, Infinity
and
something.
then that moment with Peter Parker and Iron Man, and he doesn't want to go, and you're like, and you're watching, going, what is going on here? Uh, they got you, man. There was this magical moment, and it's beautiful. So I do love the experience of going to the movie theater, but oh my God, man, like people have got to respect the experience of watching a seamless, narrative.
Movie theaters have become, and this has been true for a couple of decades now, the world's most expensive phone booth. And I'm not happy about that either. As a matter of
Right.
fact, I think it's very disrespectful, not only to your fellow members of the audience who would like for their $100 to actually see the movie, but also to the people who make those movies, the performers, the writers, the director, the staff, the crew, all those people that you couldn't care less about on the Oscars getting their little awards. You're screwing those folks over too.
Yeah.
I am old enough to watch us crawl out of the ocean, but since then, we crawled out of the ocean to get into these beautiful movie palaces. And growing up in a big city, I grew up in those big movie palaces. So these little, things that actually to me look like phone booths, these multiplex movies, they've already taken half the fun away from me because those movie cathedrals, and that's what they were, were so awe-inspiring. It put you in the mood for the movie no matter what. You could be watching Triumph of the Will, and it's a bigger film in one of those movie cathedrals.
Absolutely.
Today, I think the first one of these multiplexes I went to was in probably in the 70s in Toronto. And it was a very nice thing. I'd never seen it before. They had like 20 screens and underneath Yonge Street, which is their big commerce street. And I thought it was really interesting if you had no idea what type of movie you wanted to go to, but you wanted to go to a movie. I had felt that way when I was younger. Today, for all that money, and quite frankly, for all the hassle, get in your car, drive someplace, deal with traffic, find a parking place, even in their own lot, it's a pain in the ass. They've done everything to discourage my going to the movies.
Almost everything, except I think with like an Alamo Draft House, they also serve food and liquor. And on the one hand, I'm like, okay, I get it. It adds more value to the experience. But also, I realized I don't want to eat a hamburger while watching Captain America or Star
Right.
Wars or whatever movie I'm watching. And then they come and they give you the bill, the third act, when everything's culminating, and suddenly you're looking down trying to figure out the tip. And I'm like, what is going on? It doesn't work, for
Oh,
me, again, grumpy old
no.
Dean. But then my father used to tell me, and he's 87, just turned 87, that like the theater was a big babysitter. Like, a parent would drop off the kid and the kid would watch about 6 to 8 hours of movies, 2 or 3 movies in one day. Plus back then it came with cartoons and the news, you know.
Right.
Um, and some people could say, well, that's a bad parent, whatever. I mean,
No.
today it's
No, no, it's
then it became television, and then it became Instagram and the internet, right? The same kind of babysitting, person thing that took care of your kid. So
when I was a small child living in Chicago's Albany Park neighborhood, my mother would march me to the movie theater just about every Saturday with like a dime because that's how long ago it was. And me and all of the kids, baby boomer, so it was crowded, would get in that theater. Some of us would be up on the balcony, throwing jujubes at those of us who weren't in the balcony, which is a lethal experience. And we would watch 4 or 5 or 6 hours worth, mostly of cartoons. Sometimes some shorts were added. The cartoons were terrific and turned me into the monster I am today. And then the shorts, of course, like, the Three Stooges.
Right.
So that helped my education. And it was a lovely experience. My mother got to hang out with all the other mothers who were dropping their kids off at the movie theater, at the movie palace. And they'd go shopping or whatever, because it was always in a sort of a shopping area. And they were having a great time because they weren't next to their kids who were being murdered by high velocity jujubes. Now, they still make jujubes, and I was shocked to learn that that was still legal. Because, if I wanted to kill somebody, I wouldn't take a gun because they have metal detectors and stuff.
Right,
And they can
right,
trace bullets. Jujubes.
That's amazing. That's crappy. That's some Yancey Street Gang type knowledge.
That it is. Yeah.
I love that.
But you see, those kids grew up in the same environment.
Right.
Jack Kirby, I grew up in a Jack Kirby world.
Right.
And it was so cool, except that I didn't know that until much later on. And I saw what
You never know that. You never know that. And I'm just bringing it up because you know this, but it just reminded me, like my godmother was Shelley Winters, the actress. But the older Dean Haspiel now, the questions I didn't even know to ask her.
Sure.
That I'd want to ask today, like for instance, what was it like acting with Gene Hackman in the Poseidon Adventure?
I was just thinking that when Gene died. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, come on, and there might be a cool memory or two or whatever, or and just like I don't know, man. That like you said, the things that you don't know or you take for granted as a kid, and then you get all highfalutin, and in your 20s you start to think, well, I know everything, and it isn't until later you realize you know nothing. All you have is your experience.
And one of the most bizarre realizations, and all of you who are too young to have had this realization, it's coming your way, that you realize that you don't know anything, that the more that you learn just is like nothing. I mean, it's great, you know more, and you should, but there's still a lot more you don't learn, you don't know. And the more that you learn, the more you realize, the more you need to know other stuff. and learning, you realize at some point in your life, whether you've blown it or not, learning is a life experience. It's a lifelong experience. I think it's cool. I hated school, but I think learning is cool.
It's funny. It's the way we learn, though. It's the way we learn, because I had a hard time in school. Like I never did really well with my grades. And I think it's because, and I don't know if I have undiagnosed learning disabilities or something. And maybe it's one of the reasons why I gravitated toward comics, because it was optics and visual. And I could, there's text and image, and so maybe I learn better by looking at pictures, versus reading words. Or I can't read a manual. I have no idea how to read a manual. Makes no
Well,
sense.
nor does anybody else anymore.
Right. That's true. That's true. And so you give me some pictures, I'm like, oh, that's how you do the thing and whatever, or, but you can't do that for everything. I mean, yeah, you can, but you're not gonna. And in fact, I just finished reading Jonathan Ames's new novel, Karma Doll. It's called Karma Doll. It's the third book in a series of a character he does called Happy Doll. But I was able to absorb that. I was able to immerse, get inside it, and to, do what a book does and how you enjoy a book. But tests and learning history and science and math, forget math, So I don't know. It just like, and yet it's really difficult to teach. And I think, when I've taught the little comics that I teach, I realize like because it's visually based. Oh, look at that. Because it's visually based. Yeah, that's a great book, everybody. If you haven't read Jonathan Ames' Doll series, you can start with the first one, but you can hop right in on the third one too. They're all great. I don't know, just being visually based, and then as a craftsman of the format of comics, now you're trying to figure out what words do you put in to next to what pictures do you show.
Right.
There's that whole art form. So I don't
And you
know.
don't want to repeat. It has to be a value-added experience. The words and the pictures don't say the exact same thing. They move the story forward.
Absolutely. When you were editing, oh yeah, we're gonna be at Ithacon in 1 month. I'm actually gonna also be
yes.
at yeah, we're gonna I'm coming back thanks to Ed Cato. Cato or Cato? It's how do you say Ed's last name?
I call him Ed.
Good answer. Good answer. I think I say Cato because of the karate character. That's Green Hornet, but it might be Cato. So anyway,
I think it's Cato.
So Ed's bringing me back, and it'll be my second time. Cato, there we go. Oh, look at that! I love this new version of Bob. He's like Jarvis, or like the Butler in the Avengers. Just
Bob's
popping
a really good producer. I mean, I've told him that, and that doesn't make it so, but I'm fairly experienced. You're fairly experienced at this stuff. He's a good producer.
So because of your not because of your Pop Culture Squad cast, but you're one of the podcasts that inspired me and my buddy Vito Del Sante, who's a comics writer and editor, to spark our own real like what do you call it? Grassroots, low bar podcast that we've been doing weekly recently. I don't know if you've seen. I've been posting links where we just once a week have a conversation like you guys.
Yeah.
And we've been having some fun.
We're doing now.
Like we're doing exactly right now.
Yeah.
So what else is on your topics, your news? Do you have a little list that we can talk about before these guys hop on?
Bob keeps the list.
He keeps
he likes to surprise me, and that's cool because I like to be surprised. I can babble about anything. Knowing anything about it doesn't get in the way.
I'm like that too. One of the things that me and Vito do on our podcast, which by the way is called Vito X Dino, and it's on YouTube and Spotify. But what we try to do to each other is just try to spring questions on each other, and sometimes they're topical, like what happened this week, and we discuss something. And I'm trying to look at my little list right now as I'm talking to you to see if there's anything we can talk about. God, I'm trying to figure out what some of the hot topics that we have here. Well, there was a weird one. I don't know if you saw this, but there was a United Kingdom university that added 220 trigger warnings to Shakespeare plays, including the term of popping of balloons. Have you heard about this?
No, I love it if they're trying to make a point. If they're not trying to make a point, then I'm scared.
Oh no, they're trying to make a point.
Oh,
They're trying
good.
to make a point. 220 trigger warnings on Shakespeare plays, including the popping of balloons as a trigger warning because it might make you scared or whatever,
Well, I
kind of thing.
understand that, but that's for like real popping of balloons.
Yeah, the real popping of balloons. Get
Talking
ready
about the
for it.
popping of balloons is not a trigger action.
I hope not. I hope not. But I'll tell you this, like I've gotten a little going back to television. So like you'll start a show and I forget which ones do it, Hulu, Netflix, whatever, but they'll give you warnings of what's, violence, whatever,
Right.
blah blah blah. And I figure if it's an adult mature show, well mature 50-50, but adult, that it pretty much might have some stuff in it, violence, sex, whatever. But a recent show I was watching, The Mayor of Kingston season 3, which is pretty brutal by the way. I don't know if you've seen that
Haven't
with
gotten that far.
Jeremy Renner. But it's like, and I guess I'm spoiling something by saying this. So, spoiler, but toward the end of season 3, there was a warning that said suicide. And all I'm doing the entire hour is thinking which one's going to kill himself versus it coming naturally and being something that I see as part of the narrative rather than waiting for it and looking for it. I shouldn't have been looking for it. But I guess it raises the question, I guess, is that appropriate to like warn someone because of ideation or whatever and all that? And I know it's a heavy topic, but also it kind of, I feel like, I know people who have committed suicide, and I know that it's a thing,
Me too.
obviously, but also I just felt like you kind of stripped away some of the power of that moment by warning me
You
and
strip
making
away
me
a
wonder.
lot of that power. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And not just suicide, but anything else that they might warn you about. Like, don't warn me about anything. Let me just be an adult about it and enter it like I would when I walk outside my door.
Yeah, I don't understand the purpose of trigger warnings. I understand that you can upset people, but life upsets people.
I was going to
Everything
say,
that you
life
do.
upsets people. Right.
I mean, if we had a trigger warning tonight on the networks tonight,
Oh,
you
yeah.
wouldn't see our president at all. You just see
That's right.
trigger warnings,
That's
one
right.
after the other.
Right.
At least for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, I agree. And so I do wonder if, listen, I understand that it's the idea of being upset by something, but I'm like you said, part of life is being upset.
yes,
When I go to see a comedy, I'm going there to hopefully laugh, right? When I go to see a horror film, I'm going there to possibly be scared, right?
right,
Like that's the idea behind it.
right.
So you're not giving me trigger warnings on the comedy unless it's veering into some kind of blue territory or racist or whatever it is, I don't know. But I don't know, man. I just feel like what is going on? We're holding our hands, holding each other's hands too much.
Somehow we've become a nation and maybe a world of spoiled brats. We don't want to be upset, and we don't want you, whoever you may be, to upset me. You don't have the right. Well, okay, that kills storytelling completely, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
All forms of storytelling. Now, you seem to adapt to TV into movies and whatever, and comics. Okay, you can handle it. Try it for a while. Maybe you can grow. Maybe if you're actually moved a little bit,
Hmm.
you can figure out why, and is there something you need to do about it, or is there something we as a society need to do about it? That's the purpose of art. It's one of
Hmm.
many purposes of art, but to hold that mirror up and
Right.
say, look, this is the way it is, deal with it.
Hmm.
That's why we're here. That's why, well, I don't care if you're just doing, I was going to say Blondie and Dagwood strips, but I'm rereading the marriage story right now. So I'm really into it. But you can be doing anything as safe as it seems, and it's going to trigger somebody. How dare Blondie run her own business? Women shouldn't do that. There's a debate now going on in some corners, always been going on, of the internet about how people don't want to see gay people on television. They don't want to see black people on television. They don't want. Well, geez, sorry, dude. It's Earth. Find another planet.
Thank you. That is so absurd that you could say those sentences and that they have actually been said is ridiculous. You know?
That's Mindy Newell coddling the children.
Yep. Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Bill's right. If
Thanks,
art angers you, it's
Thanks,
doing
guys.
its job. If I anger you, send a check.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were editing more, what did you ever feel like censoring is not the right word, but did you ever give someone a note and say, listen, you can't do this? Or you can do it, but do it like this.
No, I only recall ever rejecting something once along those lines. And I think it's a cute story. We'll see if you do. You know Bill Ray.
Oh,
Bill
yeah.
was working on Wasteland, which of course some people regard as the greatest comic book of all time.
Right.
Its writer is fixing bills and whistles and all kinds of stuff right now. He'll be here a little later on. He did a cover, not John, but Bill Ray. He did a cover for Wasteland, unsolicited by me. It was just fully done. Here it is. Do you want it? And
Right.
now we did some really heavy covers
Mm-hmm.
on Wasteland. That was the whole purpose. I mean, we scared people.
Yep.
This cover was of a hobo sitting on a bridge over a river, and he was fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And on the river, down the river, just endless number of dead babies floating down the river. So he was fishing for dead babies. And I'm looking at this and I'm going like, geez, we can't print this because too many of our retailers are going to go and say they can't sell it. Either they object to it, which is their right, or they're afraid that it'll bring in a lot of heat, which is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill's very upset about that. And I mean, artistic upsetness is different than like, you've got cancer. So let me put that in perspective. So I said, well, look, let's have some fun here. I'll take it to my boss. We'll see whether he approves it or not.
Right.
So I take the art and I walk down the corridor to Dick Giordano's office. And I say, Dick, we're having a trouble here deciding whether we want to print this or not. What do you think? And I give it to him. And he looks at it, takes one look at it, and he laughs his head off and says, you already decided not to print this.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, that was perfect. And it was right. And it was exactly accurate. And
what a veteran.
I wish we could have. I felt terrible not doing it because, it really fit the theme of the book in the most extreme form. And if you can't go to the most extreme form sometimes, how do you go any further? How do you evolve?
Well, there's the extreme of something, and then there's the workaround artistically. I feel like there used to be in the New York Times or New York Times Magazine or whatever, one of those institutions would have an artist talk to another artist. In like this case, I think it was like Woody Allen talking to Martin Scorsese, two directors talking about, and what would arise is the limitations or the where they would be confronted by a wall that would kind of stop them from making a certain kind of decision in their filmmaking, and how all it ever did was make them more of an artist to work around the obstacle, and it just foments more art, more creative solutions when you come up against certain. It can, and then of course sometimes it's absurd because like 5 years later you now can do what you couldn't do 5 years ago,
right?
Even 1 year later or whatever. I remember when I drew. Speaking of Jonathan Ames, I drew The Alcoholic, which is a graphic novel he wrote that I drew that Vertigo DC published. And at one point in the story, And this had happened to him because it's semi-autobiographical. Some of it was true, some of it wasn't. But the true scene was that he had gone to Weselka, the Polish restaurant in the Lower East Side,
Yeah.
and there was a dinner situation with Monica Lewinsky, and this truly happened. She had never eaten Polish food before, and this was his account, and she decides to order kielbasa, and the plate arrived with this giant kielbasa, and the way I drew it, as the plate was being served, I guess it was a little too close to her mouth, kind of in shock at this food item, which was part of the joke. Okay, I know
Right.
it's silly, but it's part of the gag, right? Sorry again, but
Yeah.
but the editorial and the lawyers looked at the panel and said I had to change that, and I had to remove, I think, at least in that one panel, the kielbasa or whatever it was. I haven't even looked at the book in a while. So anyway, these things happen. So, you know,
Let me take a little side road here for a moment. The purpose of lawyers, corporate lawyers, and the purpose of financial planners, for those of us who've actually tried to go out and raise money for our artistic feats, is to be safe, play it safe for their clients, not to take risks. To minimize risks, if not remove them entirely. So the moment you hand it over to the lawyer, it's all over.
it's over.
You've lost. Whatever
Yeah.
it is, you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
Yes, there are ways of getting around stuff there, and sometimes they're better because you take that other path, and you find some cool shit.
Yep.
Great. That's
Yep.
wonderful.
Yep.
Don't
Thanks, Sherry.
count on it.
Right.
Don't count on it all the time because you're taking an end run around what you really want to say, what you really think you need to do.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's careful. It's a
Well,
tough.
and
It's a tough call.
ergo, I think what's happening more and more is that certain creators that want to push certain limits or take certain risks or whatever are entering the more self-publishing, crowdfunding way of putting out comics, to the point where the big question mark, as much as I love a JHU Comics, for Forbidden Planet, all the different comic shops,
Mhm.
I love comic shops just like I love movie theaters. But I don't know what a comic book is in 2025 anymore. I don't totally
Right.
understand it. From my perspective, from what I'm trying to do. Let me read something that Bob sent me
Okay.
that he wanted me to put out here for all your listeners to hear. This is from the Kirby family wrote a letter to Zelensky, and this is what they said. Okay,
Oh,
they wrote, quote, "Sir, you are supported by many Americans. You are owed an apology by the vice president and president for their disgraceful behavior. My father-in-law, Jack Kirby, was the co-creator of Captain America. I am sure he would be appalled by our president and vice president. My husband and I send our best wishes to you and the valiant Ukrainians. Jack Kirby has lineage to Ukraine as well, and we hold that with pride in our hearts because of all Ukrainians and your courage and grace." End quote.
that's beautiful, well deserved, and courageous in our contemporary world,
Yeah.
and much needed to hear. Yes, Jack and Joe Simon created Captain America, which was perfect. I mean, I'm not saying all their work was perfect, but the creation at that moment in time, which was before World War II started for the United States, was perfect. But let me remind you all that when Jack Kirby created Darkseid, the ultimate villain for DC, that it took DC about a decade to figure out that was the ultimate villain, but okay, the ultimate villain, he based it entirely on Richard Nixon. It was Nixon. And if you look and see how Kirby's posturing of Darkseid, all of a sudden the little light goes off. It's like, oh, he's knocking Nixon. Now, at that point in time, I know that seems like innocuous today because what we got going today is so much worse. But it was the end times back then, and Jack said, nope, dark side.
Yep.
So, yes, and I thank Jack's family for standing up, making it public. We have to end this shit. It's just
absolutely.
It's just as simple.
And so, to put a lighter note, on the dark side creation, when I first started drawing Harvey Picar in American Splendor, and I could only at the time base his image on the other artists that drew him, because unless you caught him on David Letterman, and I finally did figure out how to. I think my dad had a VHS or the other one, the other kind for a while, the Beta.
Betamax, yeah.
Anyway, so I was able to capture him once. I mean, I'd seen him a bunch of times on TV, but to actually like record it so I could see what it looks like. But basically, a lot of the artists had their different versions, and he just had, it was some of it looked the same and some of it didn't, right? But anyway, I finally, when I met the man and I started doing more of his comics, I realized that what I had arrived at was drawing a Caucasian-looking dark side. Was my Harvey Picar.
It's interesting. Wow.
If you ever look at when I finally refined my version of Harvey, he kind of has a dark side patina, as it were.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I gotta look at that now. Wow, that's just totally disorienting.
So I don't mean that I don't leave you hanging. I know Bob can hop on. I'm getting a bunch of phone calls, and I have to hop out of here soon. Can Bob hop in? Are we getting John Ostrander? What's going on? How's it going?
Yeah, I'm coming. I'll be in. You can bounce out.
Good to see you, Bob.
Thanks, Dino.
Red looks good next to you.
We'll see you there at the con as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
all right, guys. Good talking.
Team, wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm going to leave you alone for just a second, folks. We're getting there. We're getting real close.
Okay. So you want me to babble for a while? Oh, I'm babbling. Okay. Yeah, John has always had a little problem with technology. And it actually got to the point where I had to sort of recommend younger people to help him out. Because, I'm only like a year or two younger than John, which is absolutely scary. But nonetheless, I make jokes about his steam-driven computer. Obviously, they're not jokes. It's reality. Now that we've dismissed Darkseid and Nixon, I'm not exactly sure how we transitioned that to John. It's been just a mindfuck of 6 weeks, 7 weeks, is it? And I know I'm a very political guy. I always have been since I was 15. I've been doing this stuff, but it's never been more discouraging than now, and that's because people are looking at this stuff and saying, "Yeah, screw Mexico, screw Canada, screw Canada." I mean, I don't want to screw Mexico. I like Mexico. I'm not studying Mexican history. But yeah, Bill just noted it's been like 6 years. I'm beginning to think that it's longer than 6 years. Maybe that's COVID. Trump on top of COVID is a horrible, horrible thing because it's totally destroyed my sense of time. I don't know how long Trump has been in office. It seems like forever. How much damage he can do in 24 hours. It seems like a preposterous amount. And how much we are going to take. At some point you got to say, no, that's beyond the pale. I think for some people it's like $7 comic books, and that's okay. That's okay. Whatever symptoms you don't like, you don't like. And if there are symptoms there of what's going on today that you think are really good, you might be right. Some of them might be. I can't think of a single one right now, other than, well, at least we're getting rid of those people. That's the great rationale. We're getting rid of those people. So I take you back to the X-Men. The X-Men was a series, still is, although now it's about 120 series, about guys who are, and men and women who are mutants, and by definition are outsiders and are the others. Call them the others, which is the most horrible state we can put somebody in. And we don't know how, we just want to get rid of the others. Everybody's got their own list of others, you know, and none of them deserve to be on the list. I grew up in a city that was thought of as a fairly racist city, and in many ways it was. Until the 70s, and even to a certain extent today, every neighborhood was sort of cloistered with its own folk. For me, though, as a kid, I took advantage of that. I would go from neighborhood to neighborhood, check out restaurants, even movies when I got a little older, check out the culture, make friends. I learned a more cosmopolitan experience, and I, by the way, became a better writer, editor, and broadcaster because of it. So all the stuff that's going on today frightens me from a cultural perspective, not from a bleeding heart perspective. And yeah, hearts bleed. That's part of the job of a heart. It pumps blood. So I don't deny the bleeding heart perspective, but the cultural contributions are absolutely amazing. And it is that cultural smorgasbord that makes America worthwhile, that makes American comics worthwhile. We all were about, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white male heroes who were independently wealthy and would save America from itself. Small problem. It doesn't work in real life. Those guys aren't saving America from itself or from anybody else. They're just making more money. Those of that 1% who fit into that category, which seems like most, maybe just about all, but I don't think so. I've known very conscientious and very good people who are rich, and some of them are self-made zillionaires, and some of them just inherited it the old-fashioned way. But now it has changed our comics. It has changed our culture, to the point where people get to bitch online about how they don't want to see any more gays or blacks on television. Or about how horrible the Marvel movies are once they started letting women up on the screen, which befuddles me to no end. There are good movies and bad movies, but the gender of the heroes has nothing to do with it. It's frightening. I hate seeing this type of stuff encouraged. I love seeing this attitude being fought. We work hard to change this attitude. We believe it's for the benefit of humanity. The problem is, so do they. We believe they're wrong. They think we're wrong. Can we ever meet? Well, at some point, people have to learn where to draw the line. I hired a lot of minority artists and writers and editors when I was in the comics business full time. But Bill's right. They're more like Maxwell Lord than Oliver Queen. We're right to be skeptical of people with enough money to do whatever they want. The part I recognize, I don't understand the part where they want all the money. They want to take it from everybody. You starve to death, I want your money. And that's really what it comes down to now. I'd say more than ever. I don't understand that. What are you going to do with it? But I've never been really money-based. Sherry asked me what books I've read this week. And thank you, Sherry. I haven't read any books this week. It's Tuesday. And I've been running around like an idiot, which I shouldn't be doing at my age. I should be running around, like I know what I'm doing. But it's a way to start now. It's been way too long. Way too long. I'll tell you, it's hard. And Mendy Newell, the great comics writer who doesn't write enough comics, says it's about power. Yes, I wouldn't say not about money, because money is the way they measure power, which is, if you think about it, really sick and diverting. Power costs money. Get the power without the money. But I also believe that there's a good possibility that we're going to have a hot war in this country, and people need to be prepared for that. Them folks who want those blacks and those gays to go away, those horrible people from other countries, the ones that we import so much stuff from, and the ones that we live off of by selling them so much stuff. We got cigarette companies that don't sell cigarettes very well in the United States because we have sanctions against that. So they sell them overseas, and they're killing the rest of the world. And now people are catching on that there are a lot of people in the United States, like our president, and like his servants and his spokespeople, and the people who are too stupid not to know that taking the heat for our president is not a good long-term goal, not a good long-term thing to do. So Bob is probably thinking right about now, if he hasn't finished rewiring all of Michigan, that pretty soon I'm going to be advocating rioting in the streets. Bob, there he goes. Oh, he went away. I said rioting in the streets, and Bob goes away. Hey, Bob. Nope. He's still talking with John. I can hear John in the background. So I guess I'm going to start talking about John. Oh, hello?
Hey.
Hi. How's it going out there?
We're working on it. We're trying to deal with settings. We've got Brave installed. We're getting there.
All right. Well, tell John I'm talking about him now. Let me tell you the story about how I first met John. Probably met him at our local comic book store. But aside from that, in 1971, long before most Americans were born, I was invited to a party. It was a theater party, but the theater it was focused around was the Chicago theater movement of its time, which was brilliant. I mean, we got so many great writers and actors and directors, from all of this, Austin Pendleton and John Malkovich and Dennis Franz and Joey Mantegna, and just an infinite number. And I loved being on the periphery of that scene. So I go to this party, and they open up the door and says, "Oh yeah, you're that comic book guy. We got a couple other comic book guys over here." And I get steered to the geek corner, where there's 3 guys on the couch, and 2 of them didn't speak at all. The third one was John. So he and I got into a conversation. John was, I think, out of Loyola University's theater program, had already graduated, or whatever it is that those matriculators do. And he had a roommate that was a later roommate who was a friend of mine, who played Cymax the Simian on Warp, the original Warp plays for Stuart Gordon. So we're sitting there for like 2 hours. I think both of us probably had intended maybe on hanging out for 10 minutes and then going away, being polite and saying, well, thank you. We had a great time. Love the Coca-Cola. See you around. But no, we just sat there and talked and talked and talked. And right up until the time that John's computer exploded today, that conversation has not paused. To say he's, my oldest, longest, closest friend, well, I don't know, that's a little petty, but he is. I love the guy dearly. We did a lot of work together, and hopefully we'll do some more. But that Wasteland book was something else. And it was all created because John had flown out to New York. He was still living in Chicago at the time. And, for meetings and stuff, and we were talking about just doing stuff. He was staying with me out in Connecticut, Fairfield, Connecticut. And we took a little walk around this lake. It's a small lake, duck pond, really. And while my now ex-wife was, preparing dinner, which was damn nice of her. And John and I are walking around in the rain, in the dark, in the rain, creating Wasteland. The whole concept, the whole theory, the whole idea of every issue, we up the ante, we make it a little bit rougher, a little bit more extreme. We were young and we felt powerful or something. I don't know. But we got away with it. And here's how we did. We got away with Wasteland because the first issue had this story called RAB, Retroactive Abortion. Bill Loebs, William Messner Loebs, drew it beautifully. And the story is about how in the future, abortion is legal up to the age of 5, which kind of sounds like one of those campaign things that our president went through last year. But his was bullshit. Ours was a story. So it's okay to be bullshit back then. And these two people, the married couple, are just trying to decide whether they want to keep their kid or not. And they decide, no, they don't want him. He's like 4. Time to get rid of him. They toss him out the window. An 8 or 9 story drop. Now, Bill, to his credit, and immense credit, drew the baby landing on his diapered ass, giggling, which I thought was perfect. Absolutely perfect. And of course, the married couple goes off and decides, well, that one didn't work out. Let's try again. We can always chuck the kid. So our publisher at the time, Jeanette Kahn, a wonderful human being, read that story and said, I thought you were in favor of abortion rights. And I said, I am. He says, well, why'd you do that story? I said, I think really it's a pro-abortion story, unless you don't want it to be. The purpose of the story is to challenge your assumptions, to challenge your mind. And Jeanette understood that, and she agreed with that. The purpose of storytelling can and often should be to challenge your mind. But she never read another Wasteland story again. This gave me carte blanche, because we could do anything as long as my boss, Dick Giordano, approved. Dick would not, the only thing he ever knocked down was the Wasteland cover of Bill Ray's that I had mentioned with Dean. Dick was great for boldly going where people probably shouldn't be going in the first place. He was terrific at it. And with the liberty of the only person seeing this stuff or really going out of his or her way to look at this stuff in a position of power was my boss, who liked this stuff, and our overriding boss, his boss, wasn't reading it. You can do anything, you know, you can do anything. That's how it is. Is that sophomoric? Yes. Is that childish? Yes. Did we do a lot of really good stories? You better believe it. Very proud of our work on Wasteland. And to this very day, I have creators who I admire and respect, who are very well versed in the horror genres, coming up to me at a convention and saying, "How the hell did you get away with it?" Well, we offended the boss. Be careful when you try that. It's a tough stunt. It doesn't always work. And it could cost you your job. And today, it seems like it probably would cost you your job. Are we going back to those days? Are we going to have the Comics Code again, certifying what we can and cannot read? The Comics Code censored, heavily censored, newspaper reprint comic books. Dick Tracy, for example. They'd reprint Chet Gould's Dick Tracy stories, but they would have them conform to the standards of the Comics Code Authority from 1956, which was essentially just eliminating the offensive stuff, just, whiting it out, changing dialogue or whatever. Now, these were newspaper strips that were in newspapers that everybody read. The top two newspapers in America were the New York Daily News and the Chicago Tribune. And between the two of them, they had, and I'm not kidding, about a $4 to $5 million person circulation. So 5 million people were reading Dick Tracy and not thinking like, this is going to bring the world to an end. But the Comics Code Authority did. They said, no, you can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? This isn't Russia. Well, as it turns out, it is, but it took us a long time to get there. I don't understand censorship. People are frightened of other people's ideas. Grow up. Grow up. That's why we all started reading comics in the first place. It was cheap entertainment, and some folks were like, in the war or, World War II and stuff. Publishers would print special editions for the war effort. And that was great. But in the 50s and the late 40s, they started to say, juvenile delinquency is all because of comic books. Thank God for rock and roll. If rock and roll didn't come around and take that heat off of us, we'd be gone by now. And the Comics Code Authority started. We tried to get rid of it a million different times. And by we, I mean, yes, even by the time I got into the field. Mark Grunwald and I were part of a team of representatives from the different publishers to rewrite the Comics Code. Giordano thought it would be fun to have me on that team because he wanted to get rid of the code, and he knew that I did too. And it turns out that just about everybody there wanted to get rid of the code, including Victor Gorelick, who's editor-in-chief of Archie, and it was the founders of Archie that created the Comics Code. And we wrote it up, and it was pretty good, and I thought it was pretty enforceable in terms of not overly limiting creators' options. And the Comics Magazine Association of America had to enforce that code, and the very first thing they did was censor something that was code approved by our code, by our new code. That was the first thing they did. So the code lasted for a few more years, and it was pretty impotent towards the end. And even at the time, we rewrote it for maybe the third or fourth time. Comics, in order to survive as an art form, in order to survive as a communications form, needs to be untethered. Do we have warning labels? I don't know. Maybe. I don't think so, except for we sell these comics into comic book stores and they can't return them if they don't sell them. So if we screw over the retailers, we're going to be out of business. They're going to be out of business and we're going to be out of business. So you had to keep that in mind as a reality. I get that. That left a lot of turf. we couldn't do queer comics back then. I mean, not on the newsstands. The Undergrounds had started that, but even that was like the early 70s. So Bob is back. How are we doing?
No
You
joy.
look tired.
Listen, we're going to get John Ostrander on the show. It's not going to be tonight, but we are going to get John Ostrander on the show. We got him a browser installed. We couldn't get past allowing him to get camera and access to that browser, but we will do it. We'll do it ahead of time. We'll make sure everything's good and go, which is what I was hoping we do. But we'll be okay. We're going to get it. Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday.
Well, I think they're really goddamn sick and tired of listening to me babble and wave the red flag.
So I want to we're going to talk about some things. Mike, you know, the thing about that I love doing this show with you is that there's so many things that we have, you know, in sync with. And to be honest with you, you know, as Dean was talking, because I was doing a lot of double thinking as I was, you know, trying to deal with John, getting him to download and then getting him to figure out what he was doing and typing in the link. If you guys don't know, the link to this studio that Mike and I are in tonight, it's StreamYard.com, and that's where we post from and we broadcast to your other sites. But the link is a whole bunch of numbers and letters, so I was reading those to John, and I got to there's 2 K's in the link, and the only thing that I could think of instead of, you know, say, you know, T as in Tim, J as in John, R as in Robert, K as in Koeniger.
Oh, that's good.
That's the only thing that came out. So
that is the first time, at least in the last 60 years, that Bob Koeniger has been put to a good use. So
there you go.
God bless you.
I agree with you. But as I was saying, as I was listening, the first thing on the list, like Dean had asked earlier, you know, to you, how do we do this? You know, is there a list that you guys do? And I keep the list of things we talked about. First thing on the list is tariffs on comics. And
yes.
So you hit it without me even telling you.
Well, go figure.
So I want to talk about a couple of things. And I know you hit on the fact that, you know, the interesting part of people not realizing how important it is that, you know, we've cut down all the trees that can be cut down in America, and there's still a whole bunch in Canada. So there's paper there. One of the things that I don't know if you hit this part because I was listening halfway, but it's not an emergency today. It will be in 90 days.
Yes, I'm not sure. I know about that, the 90-day thing, and I truly hope that that printer, which is all over Canada,
Transcontinental Incorporated is the major printer in Canada, and they said that they're going to cover the cost of the tariffs at least for 90 days. Now that only helps the big guys. Doesn't help the smaller publishers. They're going to be shit out of luck.
But it also helps the retailers at least be able to continue to sell Marvel and DC.
One of the interesting little things, and you know, I need to acknowledge Rich for doing a great job at Bleeding Cool for covering this really well. But one of the things that was interesting and kind of brought up is like, are we going to be smuggling comics? People going to go up to the border and go over to Canada to buy their comics? What do we think? This is like really subversive.
I love Canada. and for me, the question isn't will I go over the border to buy comics, because way back when I was like 20 years old, I would drive up to Canada, well, to hang out in Canada, but also to buy my Asterix comics,
of course,
and my Michael Moorcock science fiction books, which were not being reprinted or in the United States at that time, by and large. There was a
Well,
store.
there was this
in
little
Toronto.
company called Image who started making Michael Moorcock science fiction comics. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, called First.
yeah, there were a couple of different publishers that did that, but this was well before that. This is
Yes,
like
no, I understand.
This is like 15 years before that, and yeah, 12 years. Baka Books, Bakka. I'm not sure they're still around.
Where was this?
In
Toronto?
Toronto, Canada, on Queen Street. Maybe they're still there, but not on Queen.
Wouldn't it have been closer just to go?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't it have been closer just to go to, like, isn't it, what's the town that's right below Detroit?
Windsor.
Yeah, wouldn't it have been easier to just go there?
Sure. Not as much fun. And it's not that much further to go on to Toronto. I don't mind driving, nor do you. And, it was a good excuse, but also Toronto is just one of the great towns in the world, in North America. It is arguably my favorite city. There isn't enough great barbecue there for it to really be my standalone favorite city. But the barbecue joint that's just across the border, just across the river in Windsor, as you leave from Detroit, they were no good. So I had to go to Toronto.
I see. I got you. I understand. So listen, this is, right now we are counter programming the king of tariffs, and live at you. I want to say thank you again to Dean for stepping in. I think you did a great job. Let's hear it for Dean. Folks, we got stuff to talk about, so hang with us. Even though John's not here, we are gonna get to John. We're gonna talk about some stuff that I wanted to get with John. We'll talk about it ourselves. I wanted to highlight again. We mentioned it earlier. Ithacon is coming up on April 5th and 6th. Today is March 4th, so 1 month just about from today, on for Saturday and Sunday. Mike and I will be there. Dean will be there. Walter and Louise Simonson is going to be there. Don McGregor is going to be there.
Don, I didn't know Don was going to show up. I haven't seen him in a long time. That's great.
Don is going to be there. Chris Condon is going to be there. Who we had on the show. I'm looking forward to that. Don Simpson will also be there again. And Tyler Chintanner is going to be there. Some of the Ahoy folks will be there. I think Joe Ryban's going to be there. It's going to be a great show. It's always great. We talk about it all the time. I just sent in some ideas for some panels. So I'll be hosting at least one. We'll see what else they want me to do. Sherry has already committed to assisting with the lines at the Simonson's table. So.
I'm glad that Sherry's coming.
Yes.
And it's nice that she's going to bring you along too.
Yeah, she'll bring me. I get to go with her when she goes and hangs out with Walter and Louise.
Yeah. Which is, by the way, most interesting couple in the history of comics. Did you really? Mindy father was a lock smuggler.
A locks smuggler. Listen, I find that amazing. So again, I wanted to highlight Ithacon. You can go to ithacon.org and get at ithacon.org and just log in there, and you'll get to the front page. But also ithacon.org/tickets, and you can get tickets to show. It's a 2-day show. It's super cheap. It's super fun. It's a great way to talk to people and find cool stuff and learn about things. So it's one of our favorite shows every year, and for programming information, folks, we're going to be doing some Thursday shows coming up. Next Thursday, the 13th, we're going to have a show. The opening of that show is going to be Ed Cato and possibly somebody from one of the students helping out with Ithacon. Ed Cato is going to be on. We're going to talk about what's going on even more than we're doing now.
Oh, I would love to have one or more of his.
I-
of those
he-
in
it-
their base.
it-
That is the real story of Ithaca.
It's put out there. They may be on break, but he's going to see if he can bring somebody in. So he's going to be here next Thursday, the 13th. And then we're going to bring in Alison Sampson, which should be great because she'll be in England. So that's next Thursday. We got more to get to. We talked about tariffs, and Dean was kind enough to talk about the Kirby stuff, which I thought was really important.
Oh, that is. I hadn't heard of that. I hadn't heard.
Yeah.
That yet. I'm not surprised. I'm gratified. That's a great cover. Did you pick that cover?
I picked the cover because I was looking for something with Russian.
Right.
It's-
And it was, well, that was a great choice.
Yeah, the
Because
others, the
Didn't
other
do
art,
very many issues of the war comics back then.
right? And that was Battle. That was Atlas's Battle, and it was issue number 65. And the stories inside are drawn by Jack, and then there's other stories drawn by Joe Sennett.
Yeah. They brought Jack in because Joe Manili died. Joe being, he was very young at the time. And Jack was sort of looking around because he was very unhappy at DC again and other places. And Stan offered him the right job at the right time. And in the process, changed comics history. But Joe Manili, I think it was it Dark Horse or Fantagraphics, just did a reprint. Alan Harvey did the color work on it of a Joe Manili anthology from his days at Atlas Comics. He did everything at Marvel. Atlas and Timely and Marvel are all the same company.
Yeah,
and it was brilliant. And from time to time, really ancient fans like myself speculate on what if Joe Manili didn't die so young. Would they have not brought in Kirby? Probably not, at that moment at least. And would Marvel Comics as we know it, would it have ever existed? Well, not as we know it. So that run of Battle Comics is actually, the writing is, let me politely say, uneven. The artwork, some of that artwork is spectacular.
Absolutely. All right. The other part that I wanted to kind of talk about that stuck out to me is I did a little bit of thinking in this stuff. And so if you look at some of the history, and this is important for a lot of people who are comic book related. So Jack's family say they're Austrian. Like that's what it says. And the reason that it says that is because when the family left Europe, the land that they lived in was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Right.
But it is not present-day Austria. It is an area of Eastern Europe called Galicia, which straddles southern Poland and western Ukraine. So my family is from that area as well. My great grandfather's family is from I knew my great grandfather as being Austrian, but he wasn't ever from Austria that we know, the little small part of Austria that we know. Right. He was from Galicia.
I have a similar background, but not at that spot. Now, mind you, all of these spots are pretty close together by modern standards. But my father's side of the family was Polish, depending on the day of the week, because sometimes that part of Poland was in Russia, sometimes that part of Poland was in Germany, sometimes that part of Poland was in Poland. So you can put any word you want to it. My father's side of the family comes from that. My mother's side was from Latvia or Lithuania, depending on what day of the week it was. Same story.
Yeah, but it's funny because my great grandparents, my grandfather's parents, one of them is from Galicia, which could be Poland, could be could be Ukraine because I don't know the town, and the other one is from Latvia.
Right. And all of us Ashkenazis, which are Jews of European extract or Europeans of Jewish extract, have roots in Ukraine. All of them. Now, during the war, a lot of that stuff got severed. They had this Nazi thing going. That was the first Nazi thing. We have another one going now. So it's a little hard to say, but I know enough of my family background, and I know very, very little. There's very few records that date back before the Holocaust. I had like 8 or 9 relatives, blood relatives of my age or older. Now I have 2, and both those guys are in their 80s, and those roots we can't trace them. At least not without spending a fortune and decades and decades. But through that, if not for the Ukraine, we wouldn't have had the Marx Brothers. Let's start there.
Sure.
Let's start there.
I mean, and Sherry posted in. We did that DNA thing, historical,
right.
And so Sherry's answer, the answer to hers, was 100% European Jew.
I was only 80.
She's 100% European Jew. And it was funny because her uncle is not 100%. He's like 98%.
Yeah.
Mindy's. I love that Mindy's on tonight, and she says, wasn't it all part of the Jewish Pale of the settlement where the Tsars said the Jews could live? Yes, I think that has something to do with it. I think that they kind of forced them east for a while, and then eventually out. And she also asked, and I think the answer is yes, but maybe you might know, Mike. Kirby was in battle. He fought. He was in infantry.
My recollection is that he fought.
My recollection is he was in infantry.
I'm sorry?
He was an infantry soldier.
Yeah, that's my recollection. I did want to point out, and thank you for reminding me of this, that when Mindy was talking beforehand, we talked a little bit about her father. Father was a World War II hero, was an air ace. And this is a man, obviously, I respect him for that alone, but beyond that, God damn it, he walked out of a hospice. Well, it was time for him to leave the hospice because he didn't do what he was supposed to in the hospice. He left. Well, and it's just a miraculous thing. So I have to point out those two things because to me those are just unbelievable. That's just a wonderful thing. Yep, I don't know. The World War II affected all Americans one way or another. Not necessarily in the sort of pro rah rah yay America way.
No.
Very, very large anti-war sentiment, pro-German sentiment, pro-Hitler sentiment, and not all of that went away after Pearl Harbor. And a hell of a lot of that is back now, i.e., Mr. Musk. It's so hard to come to grips with what's going on today for a person who has spent his whole life since I was 15 being a freedom fighter. So when we talk about guys like Jack Kirby, we look back and we see all of the strength of that fight against the Nazis, that fight against fascism gave us on a cultural level. It united us as Americans, gave us, not all of us, but most of us, gave us a common framework. A whole generation of kids, my generation, grew up missing family members, either because of the Holocaust or because of the war itself. And that's a binding experience as well.
Sure.
obviously worked into all of our culture, but Jack drew it like he meant it.
Oh, absolutely.
Every fiber of his being was there. And I'm not saying he was the only one, not by a long shot, but he was Jack Kirby, for crying out loud. He was the best. So I love that. And that issue of Battle, I'm going to wind up reading it tomorrow or the day after I know it.
Good. I want to change gears just a little bit. There's some good news. Let's talk about some positive comics news. So Ignition Press, we found out about them last year. We know the people who are doing this. It's Philip Sablik. It's Gary Gitter, and I think that's his name, something Gitter. Eric Gitter. I'm sorry, Eric Gitter, and Jeremy Hahn and Jamie Rich. They have announced their first stuff. This happened at Comics Pro. So we don't have titles. We do know who's working on their books. There's a horror project written by Cullen Bunn with Marika Cresta doing the art, which I love. Marika Cresta did Forgotten Home, the Erica Schultz book we talked about a couple weeks ago. There is an erotic art heist thriller, written by Leah Williams and art by David Baldion. That I'm sign me up for that.
Yeah,
I'll take an erotic art heist thriller with Leah Williams at the helm. There's another mystery romance with a gay lead couple with the setting and feel of like Thin Man movies, written by Jim McCann and art by Joe Eisma.
Okay.
And then there's a cosmic horror book written by Stephanie Williams with Letizia Cadonici. I'm not sure I'm familiar with her. Those are the teams that are announced. And then there's also another book that Cy Spurrier is working on, but we don't necessarily know who the artist is on that. But these sound like they've got good people working together. They've got good ideas, good stories.
Are these miniseries or graphic novels?
These are probably a 5-issue arc with room for more, kind of, I would say. I believe they're going to be, I don't think they're going to be straight to graphic novel length. I think they're going to be periodicals. I know that there's another project that they have working on. The Miranda brothers are going to be working with them. And I had heard about I will say that I had heard about the Joe Eisma working with them because it was spoiled to me by his wife. I don't think he knew, she told me. But it's announced, so I don't have to hide it anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's the nice thing. When the proper person lets the cat out of the bag, then you can breathe again.
Yes.
They had me with the name Ignition.
Oh, yeah.
That was just the coolest thing I had seen, probably since Defiant Comics, which I also think was a cool name. The logo, and I don't know who designed the logo, but you probably do or will soon.
I don't, but I will find out for sure.
I'll bet you will. That is a brilliant design.
It is. I've seen it. I
ran out of jelly bean.
I mean,
I'm sorry. I'm traumatized. Yeah, that's great.
So I have it on the back of my phone, and I've had it for like 8 months now. It's getting bad. It's getting ripped. I'm going to need to get a new one. But the night that the logo was announced, I saw Jeremy and Philip. I was talking to both Philip and Jeremy, and Philip's like, "Did you give him the sticker?" And he gives me the sticker. I'm like, "Okay, well, what's the name?" He's like, "You got to wait till tomorrow." So, but the sticker's been here, and I've said, and once the name got announced, and I showed it to people, they're like, "I'm like, yeah, I've had this for days, 2 of them, 2 days."
That's wonderful. I love hearing talented people get together to build that stage in their barn and then populate that stage with the best people they know, and they all know some really great people. So I'm thrilled. I'm looking forward to it. They're not the only new comics operation in town, and that makes it all the more exciting. It's very exciting. When I was a kid, we had a million different comic book publishers, and they were all pretty much publishing the same stuff. As we got older, the whole newsstand distribution thing fell apart, and most of the publishers went out of business. And we had Marvel and DC and Archie and Gold Key for a little while, and Charlton. If you had the right 3D glasses that can focus the off-register printing for you, and just all nothing. We had very little. Giordano did a wonderful job at Charlton with their superhero line, and that's what got him the job at DC. But it is so much more exciting today because people have such a wider range of opportunity. There's such a wider range of stories that we can tell. The idea of doing a gay take on the Thin Man, I don't like calling the Thin Man because William Powell wasn't the Thin Man, although he looks like he should have been.
Yeah,
that's great. That's killer. That's something that 50 years ago nobody would have thought of in comics, and damn few people would have thought of anywhere. That's great.
I know. I'm great. I'm excited for it. It was one of the best news stories that I found today. Much better than tariffs. I got some other things, and these are things I wanted. We were going to bring John in, but I can do it with you. We talk about this, folks, and Mike and I have mentioned this before. And the downfall of the journalistic enterprise. There was a let's see, yeah. So there's a this is the Variety has an article out, and it was published Sunday. And on Variety's article, the headline grabbing title, the headline is Bill Murray slams John Belushi biography as criminal and cruel.
Yes.
Calls out author Bob Woodward. If he did this to Belushi, what he did to Nixon is probably soiled for me. Now, I find this to be shoddy journalism. I find it to be so. Bill Murray. Now, this is the clickbait title, and he went on Joe Rogan's podcast because he doesn't give a fuck. And so Joe Rogan probably I've not watched it, and I'm going to tell you everybody now that I don't watch Joe Rogan's podcast, but on this podcast, I saw a little bit of a clip.
Everybody on the screen right now, yeah.
There I saw a little clip, and essentially he had said that somehow the concept of John had come up, and he said that he had read Wired, which is Bob Woodward's biography. Came out in '84 of John Belushi, and he said, I read like the first page and it's all garbage, it's all wrong, so it lost it for me. And then he went on to say that, well, if he did this to Belushi, what he did to Nixon's probably soiled for me. So basically saying, I can't believe what he said because I don't like this book. I can't believe anything he wrote in any other book, which is faulty logic.
It's not logic at all, but yes.
And just makes people think that, oh, well, then I guess he's wrong. Right?
Well, if you're going to bill for advice,
well, this is why, like, John was supposed to be part of this conversation too.
Yeah, and John would have been a great part because I'm going to do his part right now. Because I'm going to turn this over to Del Clove.
We're going to get to that in a sec.
Because Del was interviewed right after the book came out with Bob Woodward on a Chicago radio station. And the interviewer thought, oh, this is great. Del directed these guys, and, this is wonderful. It's all perfect. And, Del is going to come out there and beat the shit out of Bob Woodward. Now, I don't deify Bob Woodward. He's a good journalist. He's a very good journalist.
I agree.
He kind of undercut that, not with Wired, but with sitting on the information that we were all about to die from the plague.
Yeah.
The plague Trump. That still pisses me off. And compared to that, he could do anything else. But Dell did not confront Bob Woodward. His response was, look, you got a lot of this stuff wrong. I don't think you understand this. You understood the subject matter. I think you're just from a different world, and you didn't understand how things connected. And yet there's no way in the world I'm going to sit here and put down the man who got rid of Richard Nixon. And yeah. You just sort of nod and go, yeah, I get that. That's absolutely true. The book itself was hard to read because he didn't get it. He didn't get the times. He didn't get the people. He didn't begin to understand what was going on in anybody's head. It's maybe he thought he did. We all screw up. It wasn't a very good book because it gave a lot of wrong impressions.
So that book came out.
That Bill Murray, I get where he's coming from. They were friends, they were co-workers for a lot longer than you might think.
Oh yeah.
And I really don't have a quarrel with somebody sort of automatically defending their closest friends.
Absolutely.
I think that should be our go-to. But no, they're separate events. These are separate things.
I'm not necessarily upset with Bill for having the opinion about that book. Absolutely not. I also don't think that Bill Murray is the person that we go to figure out if Nixon was bad or not. I think we've figured that out. I mean, if I need to know if the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is bad, I might go to Bill. But otherwise, I think there's enough evidence outside of what Bob Woodward and did to prove that. Okay. He just opened the can and the worms flew out. Right. My issue is with Variety. And the reason I even brought this up is because this is not a news story. This is not news. This is Bill Murray giving his opinion about a book that's 40-something years old. The book came out before I hit puberty. Okay. He's been upset about it for a really long time.
Did I need to know that?
Yep, because that's how old this was.
Okay.
And it's not news. Yet it becomes, it's something that they put out in their Sunday page at noon. That's pure good time because he was on Joe fucking Rogan's podcast. Sorry. Anyway, that's part of the problem that we have.
May I add a word or two here?
Yep.
There was a game that those of us who are at all associated with Dell or Second City or the Chicago theater scene used to play back in the 70s called Name That Murray Brother. I think they were about 50 Murray brothers. I'm not sure. Maybe 60. All I know is that at the one time I played that game with folks in that community, my answers were, I had a better score than Joel Murray.
And who?
Joel, one of the Murray brothers, the one who did movies with Bobcat Goldthwait, great movies, and very good performer. Is an insanely talented family, but God, there's a lot of them. I mean,
there's a lot of Murrays. Those Irish Chicago men.
Well, and also I never met a Murray brother, certainly, who wasn't in his own way deeply unusual and very gifted. In that order.
Absolutely. All right. So you mentioned earlier, and we've talked about him a lot tonight, and we probably will when we do eventually get John on again. But I want to bring up something about. Hang on, Mindy's got to put her sense in here. In my opinion, it's a way to discredit Woodward, who, remember, has written several books discrediting Trump, which, of course, that's the point. I agree with you, Mindy. That was my point. Like, I understand Rogan doing that. I'm a little disappointed with Variety making this a story that's unnecessary.
I think that that's true. And if you think about that, if it was up there on Sunday, that's Oscar Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So the timing is a little interesting.
Yep. So
that's very interesting.
All right. Back to Dell. And I mentioned this. I don't think I mentioned it on the show, but I definitely talked to you about it. And there's something I wanted to see. There's a clip that I've seen recently, and I'm going to credit this. This clip comes from TikTok. It is Mike Birbiglia's podcast that Stephen Colbert was on. And so this is coming from Mike Birbiglia's podcast. Please, go check out his podcasts. His website is birbigs.com, BIRBIGS. I'm a big fan of Mike Birbiglia. I like his work. I think he's very funny. But I want to share this with you and see what you think about what Stephen has to say here.
Okay.
So let's just
my first person I studied in improv with was Del Close, and he used to say, "You're not improvising. You're just letting the universe channel through you if you just open up all your senses.
That's it.
Your job is to open up all the stops on the organ.
That's
and
it.
so it can just flow through you." And he would take out his little pentagram and put it on his chest before he performed, because he said the stage was a sacred space.
And it is. I mean, showstoppers. Stephen Colbert throwing show-stopping pitches.
Dell would bring that out in people. Dell was, well, let me quote John Ostrander. John asked if he could bring Dell to a party I was throwing when we were living in Evanston, and the two of them were performing in A Christmas Carol at the Goodman Theater, which is a very prestigious stage, very prestigious. And both John and Dell were working together for several years. They kept on bringing them back. And the guy who played Cymax, who I referenced earlier, William J. Norris, he played Scrooge. So I said, well, yeah, you can bring Dell anywhere and I'll show up. But I think that the several hundred other people at the party would just love it. I had met Dell several years before that. I had taken some classes after I met him. It was like 1970 or something, 71. I met him at a party. And Dell had an attitude towards comedy that was the same as the attitude I had when I jumped out of airplanes. It was the same feeling, only, if you don't think you're going to have a good time, don't jump off the airplane. And the same thing is true about being on the stage. I didn't audition for Second City because I took those classes for my radio work. Radio was live, much like this is, and I wanted to learn how to get out of a jam. Like, for example, your guest isn't available,
right,
or something like that.
Yes, and
yes, and well, that's the most important thing.
Most important thing.
It is. It's the most important philosophy. Dell articulated. He didn't create the concept, but he articulated it.
He spread it wide and far.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, when Dennis Miller would make casual reference as opposed to one of his old, throw it in your lap references to Dell Close, with respect to that philosophy, that's a wide net that's been cast. But the whole idea is you don't contradict what's going on stage in improv. It's yes and, not no, but, or because. It's yes and you take it to the next level. You keep on building and building and building until you explode, I guess. I don't know. Del made it to almost 65, which is weird to me. We were at his 60th birthday and his 65th birthday. I was at his 65th. And what an amazing man. And of course, for those of you who aren't aware, Del co-wrote many Muntins Bar stories and many Wasteland stories with John Ostrander that I was truly privileged to edit. And when Del once introduced me to somebody who I won't name, as the guy who edited Del's autobiography, I thought, my God, what an amazing compliment for him to say it that way. I felt like the sun just shined on me. I'm sorry, I probably wandered from the point.
No,
yeah.
that is the
variety.
point.
That's the point. Right, got it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Although, I mean, it's not an accurate autobiography.
It's not what now?
It's not an accurate autobiography. My understanding is that he embellished.
Well, I wouldn't put money on Del's memory, nor would I put money on my memory anymore. But he fucked with his memory more than I ever fucked with mine. Nonetheless, there's parts of those stories that you might find most incredulous, and I highly recommend that if your comic book retailer has any copies of Wasteland, buy them and read them. The parts of those stories that you might think could have been sort of made up, they're the ones most likely to be true.
Yeah.
Ask almost anybody. There are students of Del's that I have run into. I mean, name actors and stuff.
If you name
Correct.
like 10, you've already gotten 2 of his.
Yeah,
If
well,
you
Betty
name 10
Thomas.
actors.
This is Betty Thomas. She was
Okay.
riding her bicycle in front of Second City long after. This was right after Hill Street Blues.
Right.
And she's looking at me like she thinks she knows me. Well, I know who she was because I watch Hill Street Blues,
Right.
and I'd seen her on stage. So all I had to say was subtext salad, and that broke through everything. Everything. You know, oh my God, Del, yes, oh my God. The subtext salad story and my journalism training says I must inform you of this. Here's the brief version. Del one day showed up at his little classes and said, sometimes you're going to take the stage and you're not going to feel like performing. You won't have it in you. So what you do is you go to the deli and you buy a pound of coleslaw and you drop it down your shorts. And as you get on stage, this coleslaw is going to shift and you're going to move along with it. You're going to emote and people are going to think that it's subtext and that you're a great actor. Oh, okay. Good story. Well, one day, Del wound up on stage, drunk and stoned out of his mind, which was not unusual. And he just didn't have it to do the performance. So he bought a pound of coleslaw and said, what the fuck, and dropped it down his shorts.
It worked.
And, you know, after a while, it becomes room temperature, like pretty much everything else. And as sometimes happens at these things, actors might find somebody that would want to bring them home. And Del found a lady who was so interested in Del. And as they disrobe, Del drops his shorts and a pound of rancid coleslaw falls out. That kind of killed the moment.
Yeah, I mean, what I don't understand is how did the rancidness not emanate from the shorts?
It was a relatively short period of time.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know what the weather was like.
I mean, it was Chicago, so you know.
Yeah, but all I know is that it had already hit room temperature.
Yep.
Obviously, it had not started to deteriorate drastically.
Okay.
Just about everybody I know who's ever been part of the Second City or the Groundlings or Improv Olympics, those great masterpieces. Everybody knows that story, and it binds us all. I have had some name celebrities seek me out at conventions like San Diego, where it's hard to find people, and just in case I had some Del Close stories that they hadn't heard. And oddly enough, I usually had one. Not anymore so much, but back then, yes, that was cool. That was a force of life. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
I will say we're gonna do something, and this is I'm gonna spitball this to you. So we're gonna Mike and I are gonna work on something. I want to try to get to it this summer, and I think we should read all of Wasteland and podcast it.
And when you say podcast it, what do you mean?
I mean, let's talk about it. Let's talk about each issue as we go through. Let's go issue one, and we'll talk about all the stories. I think we should do that. I think we should do.
Well,
we should get the editorial overview
Mhm.
of all the issues so that it's out there. People can find it and learn what it is, and then go read it on their
We're
own.
going to be seeing Don Simpson in a few weeks.
Well, I know that, so we'll talk to Don about it, and we'll get his book.
And there are other Bill Ray, as I had mentioned earlier. There are
Mhm.
other Wasteland survivors.
We can see the other Bill's still around. See if we can get him on the phone.
Yeah, that would be great. Bill Lopes. And there are other creators there who are still with us. We can do it as a thing. I think that would be great.
I think we're gonna listen. You know, folks, comment. Let us know if you wanted that. I think we should do that. You don't have to do it now. Tell us later what you think. But I think that's something that we could do. I think it's something we should do here at Pop Culture Squad. It's part of what we do at this show. We want to make sure that people understand that this medium is something that moves from one place to another, and there are stories that are written in it. And I did some stuff earlier today where I was kind of writing some pitches for panels, and just thinking about comic books and how we talk about them and how we learn from them, whether it's if we're learning something about ourselves, whether we're learning about what it is we want to be escapist today or not. But there's always a story within a story. The narrative that you're reading is going to affect everyone in a different way. And I think that one of the things about Wasteland is that the number of avenues that each story can affect people was much greater than your typical comic book story. And I think that's where that's the genius of Wasteland.
I don't recall ever getting a letter from a reader on Wasteland saying, "How dare you publish that story?"
Well,
I think by the time
how dare you, but I'm like, how did you dare?
That's who I am. And it probably came as a surprise for people to learn that that's who John is too. I'm pretty outspoken. John is much quieter, and those are the guys you got to watch out for.
We're going to get John on the show, and folks, this has been another a night where we didn't go as planned, but I want to say thank you so much for hanging out. There's still people listening, so I appreciate you. We have a lot of stuff coming in the next month. We don't have a show this Thursday, but next week we have 2 shows. The following week we have 2 shows. The week after that we have a show. I don't have anything planned yet, but we already have some guests booked into April. So we're going to bring you as much as we can. We're going to hope that you guys engage with us, that you keep coming back and telling people about it. we're here to go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I have one to add when you're done.
All right. Well, I will say, let me get you up here. So we do have some things I can show you. Who's going to be here? All right, good. So next week we're going to have on Tuesday we are going to have a pair of creators who have a new Kickstarter that goes live next Tuesday. So we're going to be here for their opening night of their Kickstarter, their crowdfunding. It's the Olympian. It's written by Paul Eza, with art by D Fish, edited by a guy named Bob Harrison, and we're going to talk about their comic. And we'll talk about their careers. Paul's just getting started. Dee's been around for a while. She's got a lot of really cool cartooning stuff that she does. So they're going to be on next Tuesday, the 11th. We don't have a promo yet for Thursday, the 13th, but I've mentioned earlier on the show that we do have, we're going to have Ed Cato and possibly a Ithacon student. And then we're going to have Allison Sampson on after that, who is a brilliant British artist. But she's got a book that just came out where she wrote for the first time. I think it's in one of the DC like Women of Marvel type thing, or Women of Marvel things. And I'm excited for that. I know she's excited for that. She's a bit crazy, so it'll be fun.
Only a bit.
What?
Only a bit.
She's a bit crazy. Then the following Tuesday we have Mike Oming going to be on, and I'm really excited for this. Mike has really done a lot of stuff talking. He's really been engaging on social media lately about his career and about his style and his methods, and I think that's really cool. And I have a ton of questions to ask him about the stuff that he's done, but like I want to talk about what he's interested in talking about now, right?
Absolutely. One of the great creators.
And that's all. Those are the only promos that I have right now, but we will have more soon. And stay tuned to our socials. As I say all the time, we will be posting them up there. We have videos that we post up, little promo videos, but we also have recaps of some of our shows. So stay tuned to that. So if you missed something, maybe there's something interesting, you could share it with people. People can go and watch the videos, our podcasts after tonight. They're always available for you to watch or rewatch. Please do that.
I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank our dear friend Gene Haspiel for stepping in and helping us out in our moment of need. He has always been a friend of the show, long been a friend of mine, and one of the people I respect most in this world. So it's really cool to be able to just wing it with him for a half an hour or so. I had a good time with that.
You did great. I'm again. I think the same. He had popped in like, hey, I can fill in for a little bit. And I love the fact that Dean stays on with us and watches and pays attention. And he is. I love him. He's a friend of the show. I love the fact that he was willing to do that. I'd love to have him do that more often and just jump in for us because he's absolutely welcome.
You better believe it. And I'm looking forward to seeing him at Ithaca.
Yep.
Next month, I'm looking forward to seeing as many of you folks who can find Ithaca in reality as well as on a map. It's in New York State. It's a very pretty area, and it's a really fun convention. And I don't say that about a lot of conventions because I've been to so many, but this one remains unique and fun.
All right, folks, we've made it through. I wish it had gone a little differently, but this is what we got. We followed the teachings of Del Close and improv'd our way through it. And
do they still make Tinker Toys?
I think they do. I don't think you would recognize them.
Probably not. They're probably made out of plastic. Because I'm thinking maybe John needs a new computer, and if we sent him just some Tinker Toys or something. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, his computer's fine. I know what the last problem is. I just need to figure out how to tell him how to fix it.
Yeah.
We got close. We got real close, and it was an effort. But he got to the point where he got to the studio, but couldn't get the camera to turn on. So,
well, I've been in that spot, so I understand his frustration. The cool part is that John still has dull close stories to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, everything else.
Yeah, we didn't step on him there.
Oh God, no.
Thanks, Mindy, for being here. We'll
Thank you,
talk to
Mindy.
you soon. Thank
Thanks
you, everybody
to
else.
all you folks.
Thank you, everybody else who's watching. We will see you next Tuesday. Please be here for opening night of the Olympian Kickstarter. I can't wait to talk about it, and we'll see you then.
All right, take it easy, folks.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?